Yeah, thank you. Okay, so this is architectural discussions meeting, and let me just start from introduction of some new process that we have right now. So first of all, we have Magento architecture repository, and the main purpose of this repository, actually there are two purposes. One is to involve community into our discussions, so we make the decision based not only on our internal understanding of Magento and its usage, but also on the community. And the second important purpose is to have the history of our decision making. So in the future, anybody can go and see why something is implemented in this specific way. So there is a README file which describes how the process should work, how the workflow looks like, and basically in most cases it will be targeted to the Magento core teams, but any proposals from community are also welcome. One note is that which is also described here on this page, is that most likely the priority will be taken, will be given to the proposals and design documents which support some specific projects which are already in progress or which are about to start, comparing to proposals which are just about something that may happen in future and nobody knows when. So it may happen, though if there will be a lot of attention to some specific topic, definitely we will be looking into that. Also on the wiki page of the repository, we will have a link of all the meetings that we will be taking. The meetings will be bi-weekly for now, and I will be sharing with the community as well as with our internal teams on when this should happen and how to join. So that's just an introduction, and now let's go to our topics. I think Oleksandr is on the call, then I'll stop sharing so you can start.
Yeah, I'm here. Do I share my screen?
And like in general, those meetings will look just the same as what we already had internally. It will be just also more publicly available.
Okay, so my proposal is to limit our controllers' actions for processing only certain HTTP methods in a more declarative way, just call them isPost, get, etc. I want to do this because of security considerations. It's really common vulnerability that we have, that we forget to case by case limit our actions to a certain action, most likely to a post method, and thus some security validations are being disabled and can be bypassed. Another reason is because actually when someone writes a controller, they do have some certain HTTP method in mind, but it just so happens that we don't have a declarative way to state them. I'm not entirely sure, but I think it's a legacy of Zen Framework 1, and it's not really intentional. So I propose to do this like this. We create a child interface of action interface, which will have a single method, which will return allowed HTTP methods. Then in front controller, we simply check if matched by router action implements this interface. If it does, we compare current HTTP method, and if it's not in the list of allowed, we show page not found page. Also, it is really important to try to cover existing controllers that we already have. I propose to do this by making some sort of logger that each time when an action is dispatched, we will look which HTTP method is used for that, and then run just the whole suite of functional tests. And based on the information that we would receive, we'll just automatically add implementation of HTTP-aware action interface to the controls that we have information on. I know it won't cover all actions, but it's something, and I think it will be enough for now. There were some concerns about this proposal already. Gunnerman thinks we should follow HTTP standard and return 405 code when not allowed method is used. My reasoning behind using 404 page is consistency. Like when we in Web API, we actually return 404 when we can't find a URL for current HTTP method. Also, before this, when our security team was fixing similar bugs, we would also return a 404 page. Also, we have the whole mechanism regarding page not found in CMS to allow content managers to customize them. And if we start returning a 405 page for this, we'd have to come up with similar mechanism. And I don't think content managers would know what the hell is 405. It's just a bit more confusing. Another concern was that having a method returning a list of HTTP methods is not that declarative, that we should use marker interfaces instead. But I think that's not that good of idea, because there are a lot of HTTP methods existing. Maybe for some reason community will need some custom method, and then we wouldn't have an interface for that, and we'd have to create like 10 marker interfaces instead of one with a single method. I don't know, I'm not a fan of that idea to use marker interfaces. I think that's it. Oh, also, Roman pointed that we can do these validations not in the front controller, but in a router. But currently, we expect multiple router implementations to be active. And I think that it's more secure to be validating HTTP method when we have already action matched, because otherwise we would have to put the same validations to each router or create a plugin that's executed after routers match or something like that. And I don't think that's a good idea.
So Anton just proposes to have for interface for each HTTP method and marker interface, right? It will not have any methods. It will just mark
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
So let me clarify a bit. So I think in this specific situation, we should not. There is a set of characteristics that will bring us to the right solution here. Let's just follow some checkboxes that we need to check. So is the type of is the method request method a metadata for an action? Is it an inherent property of an action? Like in my opinion, yes, because can it be dynamically changed? So this action now it can process post requests, and now it can it process by default it processes post requests, and now I can dynamically decide that it processes delete requests. Is this scenario possible? It might be possible, but
some actions that process both get an action.
I'm talking about, yes, there can be actions that can process two requests, but it's metadata. It's an inherent property that is defined when action is created. It's not defined dynamically. So I estimate the probability of such actions to ever appear and such legal valid need for such dynamic behavior of defining what actions and what methods an action can process in runtime. I estimate such probability as very low. Right? So from that perspective, we can say that this property of request method processed by an action is static. Right? So it means if we have a word static, we can already say that any language construct that introduces behavior is probably not a correct approach here. So we can say that a method is probably a wrong instrument. Adding a method to an implementation that will give you a list of actions is probably not the best, not the optimal approach here, because it's not dynamic. We don't want it to be dynamic. We want it to be static. We want it to be defined and described the moment when the action is created. So now what? So that I just follow the simple logic. So from that perspective, I don't like the idea of using method here, right? So what ways of describing action metadata statically do we have? We can do some configuration. It would be overkill. We can do annotations, but as Oleksandr mentioned correctly, we don't use annotations here. Plus, why have annotations if we have different things? And we also we can use some static variable, or we can use marker interface. From perspective of so I choose here effectively between static variable, a constant that will contain list of methods, and marker interfaces. I choose personally, I don't have strong opinion on this, but I choose personally marker interfaces because a type of action, like a method that is processed by action, is the inherent property of an action. It's a part of type of an action. And if I hear word type, I prefer to use interface to mark that property. So this is my simple logic, and that's why I think I would vote for marker interface implementation, but definitely not for dynamic language constructs such as method. Okay. Hope this clarifies.
Yeah, I'm not strongly against that. I think that's a valuable option. I just think usually a marker interface suggests that we have some different ways of processing that class. Like if it's post-action interface, and we process it differently than a get-action interface.
Yes, that's exactly
But we don't process them differently. We just need to compare them, and that's it.
Comparison is actually processing them differently. If ideally they would have different, if we would follow HTTP standard in design of our actions, which would be extremely breaking change for now and not needed because since we are moving towards web APIs. But if we followed HTTP standard, our actions that process different HTTP methods would have different signatures in their execute method because HTTP dictates what actions can have request body, what actions can't have request body. It dictates what types of responses they can return. So if we would go further, I'm just extrapolating, we would have them absolutely different types of actions. So that's why the marker interfaces is a small step in that direction, but it looks like the step in correct direction, but not too big and not too big.
Mm-hmm. And it looks like it will produce less amount of code.
Yes, exactly, and it's a very elegant and simple way of marking objects. You don't create methods, you just add an interface to mark your property, and you will never have a switch statement to check. Okay, is this action a post? Let's do this. If this action is get, let's do this. No, you will never have such code, as Oleksandr mentioned in the comment, because the type of action.
We have to have this code when we validating.
No, we will not have this code because our validation will always depend on this request type. Every request will have a method, right? So in your front controller or router, wherever you decide to implement this, you will have a method, right, in your request, and you will get a method from your request, right? So, for example, you will have some code like request get method, and you will, depending on, you will have a map for request. For every request, you will have an interface, and you will look up the interface that you'll be looking for, and the only check you will have if this action implement this interface, and if not, you will return 4 or 5. I don't remember the method type that Roman Ganin suggested, right? So there will be no switch. You will not be trying to look up all the method that the action implements.
In
right?
that case, the map should be extendable somehow, I think.
Yes, it can be extensible, and it's absolutely okay to have it extensible, no problem.
I think that should be just up to vote. Don't have that much of a strong opinion. But...
What do you say once again? What do you think?
Come again?
What did you say?
I said it should be up to vote. Do you use marker? Like I said, I don't have any strong opinion. I won't argue anymore. I think both are reliable.
And
Okay.
do we also want to change to return different response code? 405 instead of 404?
I actually like the idea with 405.
That was a question.
The question is, so like there are two things to resolve here. One thing is whether we use get allowed HTTP methods or do we use a marker interface, and another one is about response code, whether we continue with 404 or do we use 405 as proposed.
All right.
Do we want a user-friendly page for 405?
I think we have to.
Why? So like
may come just use invalid URL and come for an action that actually exists, but it's not processing get, and they will get this page.
But how a valid user will get this page?
Valid user unlikely will get this page only if there is a problem with extension. I think.
So like most likely this will be a user that wants to break Magento, right? Who will try different URLs.
So you think?
So I don't know, 405 sounds reasonable for this. But okay, let's finish probably first with what we use methods, the method or marker interface. So as I understand, Anton is for the marker interface. Who else has opinion about those items?
Yeah, I think marker interface probably a little better than method.
Okay, so Oleksandr, you are more for the method, correct? Okay. I don't know, I personally like the interface more because it's just will be easier to use, simpler.
Why do you like method one more time, Oleksandr?
I don't want to make an interface for each HTTP method that exists. And I think there are maybe some cases when it's dynamic, and I don't want to limit people.
In which
so what
cases?
means dynamic, for example, that it supports multiple methods?
It can support multiple methods even with marker interface, just implement multiple interfaces.
Yeah.
What I mean dynamic is, actually, again, there is one gift card action that supports both get and post. Like when it has a certain parameter, it supports post. When it doesn't, that's a get. I don't know. That's a dumb case, but it can happen.
Yeah, maybe it should be broken down into multiple actions. So I don't know, I think like if you mentioned that you don't have, like it's not a really strong opinion, I propose to go with marker interfaces. Looks like more people think it's a good idea.
There is actually, hi guys, there is actually exists one more option, is just adjust our routing dispatch system and provide some mechanism just to place an action file, an action class in some particular place that will declare what HTTP method should be used. So we now just match the class name to the route, and then we may have some subfolders to declare HTTP methods. But this is like just one option, just to mention.
It would require lots of break and change.
Yeah, it will be break and change. It will be harder to implement, and not sure that it will be much better.
And I think we should be moving away as much as possible from by convention system.
So the only benefit of having a constant instead of interface that I can see is that we already have constant for specifying resources in controllers.
Constant. Okay, guys, let's let's wrap up a little bit. If we'll have more time, we can come back to this topic about 404 or 405. Like why we don't want to have 405 here, because it will not be user friendly, but like most likely
we have a separate mechanism, and because when we're using Web API, it also returns 404 when methods not found. So it will be about the same behavior.
But is it the correct approach?
Well, of course, it's more to the standard to use 405.
So, like, I don't see why not.
We make 405 for Web API 2 in the scope of this.
In Web API, the difference is that you have same URL, but you can have some methods implemented, some methods not implemented, and that's why like different routes are identified by a combination of HTTP method plus route. And here, as far as I understand, you will have like action controller URL, which is unique for specific actions, and usually you're not supposed to have same URL for different actions.
I think 405 would make a better case for both cases, for Web API and this too. I just wanted to be consistent. Again, regarding this issue,
documentation actually says that method head and get should not be should always be allowed. So this is like probably the sign that we should not use it for forbidding get methods on some actions. And for 404 would be more appropriate.
Quando não te fores começar a dizer, eu saio daqui da minha. Eu só estou à espera que o Kiki faça um broadcast.
that's a good point.
Okay, so 404?
I send a link to the docs in chat.
Okay. Okay, I'll add the link as well. So agreed that we will go with marker interface and 404. But in general, the proposal is good and will be really useful. All agree?
Yeah.
Okay, then, thank you. The next topic is from Alex about GraphQL.
Oleksandr, could you please stop sharing so I can share?
I don't know how to do that. The buttons are hidden. Olga, can you stop my screen sharing?
Start and force, no?
Try to move your cursor to the top of the screen and the control will appear.
It doesn't. I think I disabled it one time and now it wouldn't appear. Now I can find it. Maybe there is key combination. Well, the host can disable my screen sharing anyway.
I can't.
Just disconnect and connect again. Restart your laptop.
That would be the fastest.
Yes.
Okay, I will probably start talking on this topic so far, and when I can share screen, I will share it. So for now, we don't have like final proposal, but we have work in progress, and since we believe this is pretty important piece of design, we wanted to get early feedback, and I will basically just give you overview of some decisions that we believe are good, but so let me share my screen. But we would like to get your feedback as well on this. So the background is that we are working on GraphQL mutations and queries for checkout, and the idea is that we should be able to complete checkout flow using GraphQL completely. And there are multiple questions how to design and decompose those endpoints to make them convenient for users. And also we should take into account some specifics of GraphQL. And for now, I would like you to focus on like this section over here. And I will just go over some items, give you different alternatives that we discussed and the alternatives that we believe is the best one. And after we get some clarification and like most opinions expressed on this topic, we will be able to work on specific schema for all these queries and mutations. So first of all, I'm sorry, I want to focus on this one. So first of all, we would like to have separate mutations. So for somebody who doesn't know like what mutation is, it's like command in GraphQL. So anything that doesn't mutate state is query in GraphQL. Anything that modifies state is mutation. So let's say adding products to cart or setting shipping method, it's mutation. Getting cart information, it's a query. So we would like to have separate mutations for each product type. And this will be used while adding items to the cart. Let's say if we consider products query endpoint, over there we had a single interface, like product interface, and we had multiple implementations for that interface for different product types. However, GraphQL doesn't support polymorphism and interfaces for cases when you accept it like as argument for mutation, for example. So GraphQL differentiates like different types, like regular types and input types. So for input types, we cannot use polymorphism. And so far, we believe that the best option would be to provide different types, input types for different product types, and use separate mutations for adding different product types to the cart. Why that's important? Because let's say simple products can have custom options, Configurable products can have configurable options and custom options. Like group products can have just grouped options. And so basically we have different set of fields for different product types. And it is just inconvenient if we try to get everything to the same type and then force client to decide on their own. And client will not have any support by GraphQL schema, so they won't have autocomplete like working properly. They may end up with invalid combinations of fields. So let's say you are not supposed to send like bundle options and configurable options in same request. If you separate this, we can create nice strict types, and you will get autocomplete. And why this is also why we believe this is a good idea, because if you look at PWA scenario, you will be making this add item to cart from usually like from product details page. And on product details page, you know the type of product you are currently viewing. And it means that you can create some map on JavaScript and basically to say if my product type, current product type is configurable, I will use like add configurable item to cart method. So this is like one of the most important points so far. Like if you have any questions or comments, let's discuss now, or you can give feedback later. Okay, so the next point is that we want to have uniform endpoints for guests and customers. This is just for convenience, and right now customers and guests are differentiated by presence or absence of authorization header. And basically, if you have valid customer token specified in header, then we know that this is customer, and otherwise we assume that the user is guest. And we believe it should be possible to unify those interfaces. It will be just easier for everybody, and we will not have like special endpoints for customers, special endpoints for guests, like we have in REST implementation right now. So you will be able to use same types.
Framework, you mean that framework will, based on the authorization token, define if a customer is logged in or not logged in, but if the actual service contracts or endpoints operation that are execute that are supposed to are required to execute are called to execute that action are different, the framework should be able to identify and to differentiate different actions for a single GraphQL endpoint, right?
Yeah. So we already have example. The simplest step here was to implement like create empty cart mutation, and I believe it was already implemented by some community member. And what we do, we just look at user context. So user context is identified same way as it's done in REST. We just look at header and we initialize user context, and then from user context you can see current user type. So it can be like admin, integration, customer, or guest. And if it's customer, you can get customer ID. And based on this, resolver can decide what, let's say, service contract should be invoked, like if we still use service contracts.
By the way, guys, cart as it is has knowledge about is this customer cart or guest cart. So yeah, I believe we can manage them in the same way without difference.
Okay. By the way, is this design already on GitHub?
No, this is, as I mentioned, this is work in progress, and you can notice that this is like architecture project. So as soon as the document is done, it will be published to this architecture. But
well, I think it makes sense to publish it and have at least a branch to collect feedback there, and create a pull request, get feedback. So just it's easier for me, for example, to read stuff.
Yeah, I was going to do that soon, but first I wanted to provide like initial version of schema, like proposed schema, and to create a schema, we need to get answers for these items. And if you have if somebody notices that there is something wrong, it's better to like give feedback now before we spend a lot of time on like creating details for the schema.
For create first iteration of schema, what I'm saying is it's hard to to get it so quickly, and we don't have enough time here to dive into that. So it's better to have something to read, and that's how you can.
Yeah, I will definitely post it like in the next couple of days. So the next point is that we want to create separate mutations for each checkout step. So alternative is to create one huge mutation with a lot of optional fields, and then let's say if you provide shipping information, we will save it. If you provide like I don't know, payment method, we will save it. If you don't provide, we will not save it. But this seems to be like really complicated, and most likely in the most scenarios we will have to do this step separately anyway, because usually customer first adds products, then like goes through every checkout step like separately. And we are going to have like create empty cart, add items to cart, and all other steps that we usually do in checkout separately. At the same time, GraphQL allows to combine several mutations in one query, basically. So you can send just one query to Magento, and all mutations which you specify will be executed in sequence. In case of GraphQL queries, it will be in parallel. In case of GraphQL mutations, it will be in sequence to prevent race conditions between your mutations. And that's why it should be possible, theoretically, to create empty cart and then send all the data still in one GraphQL query. So it should still work. And at the same time, we still can create new endpoint. Like sometime in the future, we can create endpoint to create order in one call. If we need that, if we decide that we want that, we can do that. But so far for regular checkout flow, we believe that it's better to separate the steps. And it will improve granularity, and it will also make every step cleaner, and interface will be more usable and developer friendly. So any suggestions or concerns on this item?
Why do you prefer to split these actions?
So the main reasons are like, first of all, use cases usually have like different steps. You don't normally create cart and populate it in one request. Because let's say to get valid shipment options, you need to populate like your address and items first. And basically, I'm not sure like if anybody is doing that, but it should be possible if you know exactly what your shipment options, correct options are, etc. It should be possible in the future to create order in one query, in one mutation. But we are not sure that it's good to populate cart in one query. But as I mentioned, you can still combine some steps in one query if you know how to do that. I mean, if your flow supports it.
By the way, please, as a side note, please don't forget about general API design guidelines that we should follow about idempotent API endpoints. All of them should be idempotent, and multiple operation for everything.
I'm sorry, there is some noise. Can you repeat, like idempotent operations and what? Guys, can you mute, please? Okay, yeah, now it's good.
I think I know who joined the call. Please do. Please make sure that we have all operations are idempotent and bulk, so they can process multiple entities per call. So, for example, you can add multiple products to cart by one call.
And sorry for interruption, we had this discussion internally, and we did not find any case when we have to add item to cart in bulk. So we don't have such user scenarios, and this
we don't have them today, right? But and that's a general guideline, and I don't think that's something.
I know.
Discussion now. That's a technical guideline that we have, and I think we all should reread it if you don't forget about it. It's a general guideline that all APIs should support multiple entities in every operation?
In general, yes. Okay, let's discuss this separately because we find some specific cases related to checkout process.
Hey, this is Misha too. We think we did identify some scenarios where you can add multiple products to the cart at the same time. Like an example is order by SKU in my account.
I understand. I want to emphasize that the design guideline that was added to our technical guidelines, it was specifically added there because API, we did a mistake in the past where we didn't take into account, where we designed APIs for the scenarios that we envisioned for us in that current moment, right? We have to understand that in future cases, APIs can be used by our agent, by our third-party developers in the ways that we don't foresee now. That's why they have to be implemented in a way that will support a performant multiple actions, including customization. So, for example, if you add 1,000 products to cart, you don't dispatch 1,000 item added to cart events. You dispatch a single event, items added to cart. Right? I'm just reminding you why we introduced the design guideline. And if we have the design guideline, if it's published, we cannot just go in a single design decide that we don't follow it. If it's saying that it doesn't make sense, we first have to go and change our constitution, our technical guidelines, and then we can change that rule and not apply that rule on some specific design. I'm just reminding you that the process, how it's supposed to work. You cannot ignore what's written in technical guidelines. But I'm not saying that you're ignoring it here, but please don't forget for future.
Okay. So maybe we have to take a look and ensure that everything really covered with technical vision right now. By the way, bulk operation for cards may violate GraphQL restriction, which says that we cannot use interfaces for input types. So right now, this design proposes us to use different types for each type of product. If we want to support bulk operation for add to cart operation, because of GraphQL limitation, we will have to use the same type for all product types. This is my concern.
Or group them somehow by types, maybe. I don't know.
So if you do it like in current design and make different endpoints, so we can potentially accept, like in this version, it is like accepting single item except for groups. Like the idea was to have multiple items accepted for grouped products, but for everything else, just single item. But we can do it like multiple items of specific product type in one request, and then you will have to split basically in your client side. You will have to split it like, let's say 5 simple products will be in one request, and then 5 configurable in another request, and it will be like single GraphQL request, but on the server side it will be different resolvers which will process those. And my concern is that you will not be able to have like single event in this case. Like Anton, does it make sense to have Anton Krill? Does it make sense to have same event, like single event for all product types?
I don't know, might be. It requires more time to think. It's just a requirement. It's a performance requirement that there should be. You might have different events for different products. I'm not sure if that would be a good solution, but think about it.
Okay, so yeah, let's move on. We need to think about bulk operations. Do you have more items?
Yeah, and one more item is that we plan to have hashed IDs for cards and card items and all those card related operations. If you remember how it is done in REST right now, if you are a customer, then your ID is just regular ID from database. It's not hashed or anything. If you are a guest, you have hashed version of that ID, which is preventing just guessing IDs of different customers. And here we would like to have probably unified approach, and we would like to have hashes for customers as well. Like, any concerns with that?
Do you want to implement it for GraphQL, and then do you mean like to modify for entire Magento?
We cannot modify it for entire Magento because it will break and change in REST. But we can do it for GraphQL. So in GraphQL, you will have just hashes all the time. So it will be still like string type in both cases. But we believe that it is better to hash ID just in case for security reasons, not to expose IDs.
For security, and I believe for extension developers, because behavior will be the same and nobody will need to make additional checks. Is this customer card or Quest card?
I agree. I'm just thinking if we can look into whether we can change it for, like, in general.
Can I change it for REST?
Yes.
I would say this is a good point to put this decision to check out technical vision. But yeah, soon we will be able to break this functionality at REST. We will do this.
Yeah, suppose that's it from my side. I can show some schema, but probably it's too early. Yeah, so most likely we will have to discuss this couple more questions, and then we will create initial version, like draft of schema, and publish it for further discussions.
Okay.
I have one more question. Do mutations allow to define some dependency on each other or some order? Because you, for example, you can send payment method before addresses were not set.
Yeah, as far as I know, you cannot.
By the way, in the same time, it will be part of one domain object, and you will be able to make this order in your implementation.
I'm not sure, Anton, you will be able, because it will be resolved by different resolvers, and the sequence of resolvers invocation is defined by framework.
Yeah, but we have a very flexible resolvers, and if you need to specify order for implementation, you can do this. So nobody limits you with to write a custom resolver which knows exactly how your shopping cart should be stored.
Okay, yeah, we can discuss it later. Okay. Obviously, you can create like custom implementations, but as far as I know, currently it is not supported. Like, most likely it will work, but there is no guarantee that you will get mutations processed in the same sequence that you send them.
Okay.
So if you have any other questions or suggestions, feel free to reach out to me directly or participate in discussion in several days when we publish this document. Thanks.
Thank you.
By the way, great document.
Anything else to discuss today? We don't have anything on the agenda. Okay, so I think then we are done for today. Thanks all for joining. See you next time.
See you. Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.